We're so grateful to have Zoe Novic here. Zoe is the Executive Director of CAPE, Center for Animal Protection and Education, where she combines her passions of animal advocacy and public health with a diverse background that includes 2 years in the Peace Corps in Indonesia. She has a master's in public health from Yale University and leadership roles with the Humane League, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and Greener by Default. Zoe has expertise in grassroots organizing, public health policy, and advocacy. She was recently a guest on my Hope for the Animals podcast, so you can listen to more of her there on my podcast, and she's here with us today. Please welcome Zoe Novic.
Thanks, Zoe. All right. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be back at the Sonoma VegFest, one of my favorite VegFests in California. And so as Hope mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of CAPE, the Center for Animal Protection and Education. We're a nonprofit organization that's been around since 1992, and we work to save the lives of animals who are older or who have special needs or who have been overlooked. We aim to educate and empower people to reduce animal suffering in their everyday lives. Over the years, we've rescued thousands of animals through our rescue and adoption programs. We also operate a small animal sanctuary located in Grass Valley, California. So before I get started and dive into my story and CAPE's story, I'm very eager to hear some of your stories. So I want you to turn to someone near you and take 1 minute to share a story about an animal that impacted your own life. When 1 minute is up, I'll tell you to switch so you both get an equal time to share your stories. All right, ready, set, go. Okay, raise your hand if you feel comfortable sharing. Yeah.
Raise a pig for 4-H, and I didn't make the connection that the animal would become food. I don't know why I didn't connect right away. So as I got a runt of a litter, this cute little pig, named her Tawny, and as she grew, I realized how intelligent she was, and then I sort of slightly underfed her so she didn't make weight, so she didn't have to be sold at the fair. And that animal really changed me.
The memories that we have with animals and the face-to-face experiences that we share are one of the most compelling and most powerful tools that we have in the animal protection movement, because it's often through the story of a single animal or a single name or face that we experience and begin to change the way that we think and interact with animals. I personally first experienced a powerful connection with an animal when I was 5 years old, and we rescued Strawberry. Strawberry was this beautiful red chicken that we rescued along with some other hens from the local animal shelter. And Strawberry and I quickly developed a bond like most people might develop with a dog or a cat. I would spend every day after school hanging out with Strawberry. She would ride in the basket on my bike or sit on my shoulder or let me hold her in my arms like a baby. I could read her social and emotional cues, and we were just very bonded. I learned so much about chicken behavior and chicken intelligence from Strawberry, and she really is the catalyst for my love for chickens and for all farmed animals, and the root of my ambition to end animal suffering. So to help tie this all together and explain why my family was rescuing chickens from the local shelter when I was 5, my mom is actually the founder of CAPE, the organization that I run today. I always refer to CAPE as my younger sibling because it was founded just 6 months after I was born. So I've grown up alongside the organization. I've witnessed all sorts of changes and growth and animal rescues. CAPE actually started as a dog and cat rescue and adoption center, and over the years, we were able to expand our physical space and which meant that we were able to rescue all kinds of different species. And yes, this is me and my dad in 90s high fashion at the sanctuary. And we officially became an animal sanctuary, mostly for farmed animals. And so it might seem obvious to you that I, the daughter of a mother who founded this really awesome animal rescue, would one day go on to work with that organization myself. But this was not the least bit obvious to me. And in fact, my career journey led me to Indonesia as a Peace Corps volunteer. It led me to Yale to get my master's in public health. And it led me through a number of different policy and advocacy roles within the animal protection movement. But what ultimately brought me back to CAPE, after experiencing all these different roles and jobs within the animal movement, was a deeper understanding of the power and the importance of animal sanctuaries. Which brings me to this moment with you all today, speaking about the vital importance of animal sanctuaries. And I think in order to effectively answer why sanctuaries are important, we first need to examine the question that we get a lot and talk about why people think that sanctuaries are not important or not valuable. So the 3 points that I hear most often are that the animals don't serve a purpose at a sanctuary, sanctuaries are not professional, and sanctuaries are inefficient, both in funding and in function. So to focus on the first point, the animals don't serve a purpose, we often get questions at CAPE about why we don't eat the chicken's eggs or use the animals' bodies for various things, basically turning the sanctuary into a farm. And the short answer to this point about animals not serving a purpose is that you're right. Mostly, you're right. Animals don't serve a purpose for humans at animal sanctuaries. And the reason is that society has conditioned us to see farmed animals as valuable only if they serve a human purpose. But sanctuaries challenge that idea. At sanctuaries, animals are not here to entertain us, to feed us, to work for us. They're here to just be, to live their life for their own sake on their own terms. Sanctuaries are a physical space that help us rethink what it means to live in harmony and respect with other beings. For the second point, sanctuaries are not professional. This summer, I attended the Animal Vegan Advocacy Summit, which is a conference for people interested in the animal advocacy movement. And I was in a small group discussing various funding challenges, and someone turned to me and said, well, donors don't want to donate to sanctuaries because they're not professional. So over the past decade, the animal rights movement has increasingly put an effort in to professionalize the movement in order to gain credibility and secure funding and scale our impact. By adopting polished branding and campaigns and data-driven strategies, organizations aim to appeal to donors and policymakers and more mainstream audiences. And this shift toward professionalism has enabled greater influence and brought in many more donors and advocacy efforts, and overall led to some really major advancements in the movement. But the logic really breaks down, and it would be deeply misguided to say that animal sanctuaries are not professional. Many sanctuaries consistently deliver some of the most tangible, values-driven, and high-impact grassroots work, advancing our movement's goal day in and day out. And I fear the term professional has become confused with the term corporate. But the context of animal sanctuaries is really important here. 6 months ago, we rescued a senior horse named Ruby. It was one of those really big, complicated rescues, the kind that took a lot of organizing for different volunteers in different cities. We coordinated different types of transport for Ruby. We prepped the sanctuary for weeks to make sure that we had the proper care and the proper facilities to house Ruby. And the day that Ruby arrived, everyone was excited. We were all ready to welcome this beautiful older horse with this really terrible sway back, welcoming her to a place where she could finally rest and be safe for the rest of her life. And the same day that Ruby came to Sanctuary, our cherished 37-year-old burro, Selena, the matriarch of the Cape burro herd, or donkey herd, suddenly fell gravely ill. Her head was dropped, she could barely walk, and our team had to act really quickly. We put her on stall rest, which means that she was away from the big pasture where the rest of her herd was. And our vet came out and we worked together to start treatment right away. That night, after we got Ruby, the horse, settled into her new stall and her new corral, I got a call in the middle of the night from our animal care team. Selena was really struggling and she needed to be moved. This sick donkey, who could barely walk, was determined to get back to her herd. Being separated from them in her own separate stall, away from the family that she's led for years, was taking a psychological toll on her that was really harming her physical health too. And the fact that our animal care team knew her so well and could recognize this was really impressive. So we got into action once again very quickly. Our animal care team and some volunteers who happened to be staying at the sanctuary from out of town overnight, we got creative and we got resourceful real quick. And we got to work. Within minutes, we built a temporary corral right outside the main pasture, which was lined with soft straw so that Selena could still rest and also still see and hear her herd just outside. The care and creativity, resourcefulness, community, and hard work of our CAPE team, this is what professionalism looks like at a sanctuary. The other side of professionalism that isn't really talked about enough is the internal side. We all know high-power professional organizations that are run on fear, manipulation, and mistrust, hidden behind sleek mission statements and impressive metrics. We are more likely to have high turnover rate and lose really impactful, hard-working people who could be advancing our movement when they are working in these mistrustful environments. Real professionalism isn't just about appearances or numbers. It's about integrity and treating each other with compassion. What particularly warmed my heart after this incident with Selena is the fact that the volunteers who were out of town, they actually live in New York across the country. They still keep in touch and check in with our animal care manager, Renee, who lives at the sanctuary. The community aspect of this night and the community aspect that sanctuaries build cannot be overstated. Hand in hand with a focus on professionalism came a focus on data and metrics and cost effectiveness, specifically for the purpose of donor recommendations. Organizations that are able to produce high impact numbers have become the ones that are most rewarded. And you can already guess that sanctuaries are losing critical funding as they are deprioritized in the movement because their impact is just harder to quantify on a spreadsheet. Some critics argue that other methods like legislative advocacy, corporate pressure campaigns, alternative protein development have a broader, more systemic impact. They believe that sanctuaries help only the animals in their care and don't directly affect the billions of animals suffering on factory farms. And these are all extremely worthwhile efforts. I believe that we need all kinds of different strategies at all different levels in order to be the most impactful movement and create the most change for animals. However, to suggest that sanctuaries are inefficient compared to these other strategies really misses the full picture. First of all, sanctuaries often collaborate on systemic efforts like plant-based school lunch programs, environmental campaigns, after-school education, and community outreach. Sanctuaries' impact is broader and beyond the sanctuary itself, and that's why it's so hard to quantify. Now, I do understand the criticism about funding. Sanctuaries typically care for a relatively smaller number of animals at a higher cost compared to the massive campaigns that could potentially affect millions of lives by preventing the animals from being born into the system of cruelty in the first place. Providing food and medical care, shelter, and staff support for even one rescued animal can be expensive. But I do want to point out the impact. This is Roxy. She's a 15-year-old dachshund who was set to be euthanized at a local shelter. And Cape stepped in and took her into our assisted living program. We funded some major dental surgery, including the removal of 13 rotting teeth. And while removing those teeth, the vet found a painful foxtail that had been embedded in her gums for who knows how long. Helping Roxy wasn't just rescue, it was a chance to educate people, educate the public about shelter rescue, pet overpopulation, senior pet adoption, and compassionate care. So yes, while sanctuaries often care for fewer animals at a higher cost, this work fills a critical role that other tactics simply cannot. It's direct compassion, public education, and it's living examples of the world that we're trying to create. Sanctuaries have the power to remind us why we're fighting for the animals in the first place, and they remind us who we're fighting for. Now, earlier I said that the animals at sanctuaries don't serve a purpose for humans, and that is true, but their life stories do serve an educational purpose. It's so rare for anyone and anyone in the general public to get to meet a chicken or pet a goat or brush a donkey or lie down in the mud with a pig. Throughout my life, I've been lucky enough to share Cape and the animals' life stories with my friends and colleagues, introducing them to animals like Strawberry and to pigs like Howard. Howard came to Cape in 2016 after he was abandoned at an animal shelter in the Bay Area. And when Howard arrived at Cape, he was in really critical condition. He was severely obese, so overweight, in fact, that the folds of fat around his face were causing really painful abrasions around his eyes. And we were told that he was blind. He had really overgrown hooves and he could barely walk. You could tell that each step was painful for him. But with proper veterinary care and nutritious food and daily exercise, his weight came down, we trimmed his hooves and his tusks, and after losing some weight, we found out he's not blind. He just needed a little bit of exercise and proper nutrition. Howard can now walk freely, he can see, he can root around in the dirt and feel the sun on his back outside of living in the shelter, and he's living a life that every animal deserves. He serves as a really powerful educational life force at the Cape Sanctuary. And even though he's grumpy, he does allow people to pet him sometimes. This is Apollo. Apollo is the first resident that anyone visiting Cape will meet. He is extremely welcoming and curious. Apollo came to Cape as a young kid. He was used in a local FFA program, Future Farmers of America. And when he was a young kid, he had a brachial plexus injury, which meant that he couldn't walk very well, which meant that he couldn't really gain a lot of weight, which meant that he wasn't really useful to the meat industry. And so one of the family's friends just fell in love with him, and she didn't want him to have to go to slaughter. And so she convinced the family to take him to Cape to find sanctuary. And this is Apollo today. This was him last month at our volunteer event. He loves people. This is Papa. Now, Papa's story is a little complicated, but I'll try to get through it really quickly because I know we're close to time. But in March of 2020, we got a call about this wild donkey, wild burro, who had spent 8 months confined in a prison stall in a Nevada state prison. And before that, Papa had roamed free on public lands for his entire life, for nearly 30 years, living wild with his herd. And what happens is there's still herds of wild horses and wild burros roaming around Nevada and California, but they become an issue for the cattle ranchers who want that land for their own cattle. So the Bureau of Land Management will often fly helicopters really, really low to the ground in order to scare these herds of wild burros and wild horses. And this is what happened to Papa. He was separated from his herd. He was scared, and they separated him into a stall or a holding pen. And what happens typically for these wild horses and wild burros is they're kept in these holding pens and either sent off to auction or sent to slaughter. But what happened to Papa is fairly unique. He was sent to a prison in order to be used for this prison program where they were training prisoners in Nevada for job training, basically to train them to become farriers or to train them to gentle or tame wild horses and wild burros so that they might find jobs when they're released from prison. But Papa was really not having it. Because he was so scared and he was frightened, he was grieving, he was separated from his family and the only place that he'd ever known as home. So he was kicking and he was charging the people who were trying to tame him. And he was labeled as dangerous. So he was at risk of being sold off, probably for slaughter. Thankfully, the American Wild Horse Campaign, which is an incredible organization, they do so much wonderful work for these wild horses and wild burros. They stepped in and they called Cape and asked if we could take him and add him to our herd of burros. And we said absolutely yes. So Papa arrived at Cape and he was still pretty wild. He was not very trustful of humans, but after a few months of really gentle, you can see now he's not very wild. He watched as the other burros at Cape saw how the humans were treating them, and he saw how the burros trusted us. And we slowly earned his trust through lots of gentle petting and treats and food, and he is one of the sweetest burros at Cape. Our movement is really complicated. We're often asking people to make major changes to their diets, to their lifestyle habits, all for the sake of animals who they will never meet. We're talking about billions of land animals, trillions of fish killed every single year. And there are, of course, lots of benefits outside of the animals, benefits for the planet, benefits for human health, but numbers and statistics like that are really hard to comprehend. They can feel really distant and really abstract. But what can really change hearts and minds and really spark action is connection. Not to a statistic, but to a story and to an individual, a single life, a face, a name, a personality. And in fact, we heard at the beginning of this talk about how an individual animal impacted your own life and made you see and treat animals differently. This room today and this whole event is proof of the connections and the inherent empathy that drives people to help end animal suffering, and then inspires others to do the same. And of course, we can't leave out the humans. Sanctuaries also provide a physical space for humans to gather. They provide public education, they collaborate with other organizations, and offer a physical space for humans in our movement and outside of our movement to spend time together. Sanctuaries are a physical, proactive representation of how we hope to build our world. So if you're not feeling inspired already, here are some resources and local sanctuaries to visit. Please support your local sanctuary. There are So many sanctuaries in Sonoma County alone. There's Charlie's Acres, Goatlandia, Sonoma Chicks Rescue and Sanctuary, Forget-Me-Not Farms. There's also close by Herd and Flock, Animal Place, Blackberry Creek, Rancho Compasión, and of course you are always welcome at CAPE. CAPE is truly a family-run operation. I want to say thank you to my partner Austin for capturing all of these beautiful photos that you've seen in the presentation today. Here he is, dedicated to the craft, lying down in the chicken coop. And please stay in touch. I'm Zoe at capeanimals.org if you want to email, and we are at Cape Animals on all social media. I think we have 4 more minutes for Q&A if anyone has any questions. Thank you so much for being here today, and I hope you get to spend lots of time with animals the rest of your day.